Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're continuing our Let's Talk Lore series, covering the Nanman expedition, with episode 7 titled The Elephants Are Coming. So last episode, we left off as Meng Huo was released for a 5th time, and this time, Meng Huo fled straight back to his base of operation in the Silver Pit Caves without delay. Now, the Silver Pit Cave is located at the crossings of 3 rivers, and slightly south of a city named Sanjiang, which translates to 3 rivers, and in its north lies a great plain that is cultivated for agriculture, and to its west lies a salt mine that supplies the locals with salt, and to the south is the Silver Pit Mountains, which, as the name suggests, produces silver. So as you can see, Meng Huo's base is quite wealthy and self-sufficient. And when Meng Huo arrives back, he summons over 1,000 clansmen to plot their revenge against the Shu Han forces. And during this meeting, Meng Huo's brother-in-law Dai Lai offered a plan to defeat Zhuge Liang. Dai Lai suggests that his friend, King Mu Lu, of the Bana Cave to the southwest, is a well-known beast tamer in these lands. And in battle, he rides atop of a white elephant and uses tame beasts like tigers, leopards, and wolves to fight as well, and utilizes poisonous creatures like snakes and scorpion to defeat his enemy. So if we could secure an alliance with him and his 30,000 men, then Zhuge Liang would not stand a chance. Meng Huo agrees, but before King Mu Lu would arrive, he had to mount a separate defense inside the city of Sanjiang, which has city walls and acts as a fortress guarding the north bank of the 3 rivers, shielding the Silver Pit Cave on the south bank. And when Zhuge Liang arrives, King Duosi was tasked with defending the city alongside some of the best archers who grew up hunting for Meng Huo's cave. Now, the city has huge defensive advantages as 3 sides of the city were surrounded by the rivers, so there was only one direction to attack from the north. And when Zhao Yun and Wei Yan led the first wave of assault on the city, they were beaten back by a barrage of poison volleys from the archers defending inside. And seeing that many of the men suffered from the effects of the poison on their wounds, Zhuge Liang called off the second planned assault, and instead rode out in his mobile war cart to scout the city himself. After a quick survey of the land, Zhuge Liang orders the army to retreat and moves the camp several kilometers back from the city. And with the Shu Han forces retreating, the Nanman forces inside the city cheered as they managed to score their first solid win. But still aware that they can't match the Shu Han forces in numbers outside the safety of the city wall, they did not give chase. Back on the Shu Han side, a new encampment was erected not far from the city, and the army rested for the next 5 days, with Zhuge Liang not issuing any new commands. Then, at sunset on the 5th day, Zhuge Liang summons 100,000 men, and orders them to report to the center of the camp with instructions to bring their casual robe along with them. And after they reported in, Zhuge Liang orders them to use the front flap of their robe to make a sack and fill it up with dirt as soon as possible. So 100,000 men got busy converting their robes into sacks and filling them with dirt. Then when the task was done, Zhuge Liang orders them to charge as quickly and silently as they can using the cover of the night to the walls of Sanjiang city and deposit their bags of dirt there at the foot of the wall to form up a ramp reaching all the way to the top of the wall. And once that was done, the Shu Han army stormed the city. And even though the archers managed to fire a few volleys off, they were helpless to stop the overwhelming amount of troops pouring into the city from the huge ramps. And after a valiant effort to organize a last attempt to hold the city, King Duosi fell in battle, and the city of Sanjiang was now in the hands of the Shu Han forces, and the gate to the Silver Pit Cave was now open. And when stranglers reached back to the Silver Pit Cave to report this development to King Meng Huo was shook, as he was reminded of his prior defeats at the hands of Zhuge Liang. But suddenly, a calming hand laid itself on his shoulders as his wife, Zhu Rong, walked behind him, mocking him for being so scared, and that she was willing to ride out with him to face this Zhuge Liang. So, Meng Huo's wife, who is making her first appearance in our lore series, is supposedly a descendant of the Zhuorong clan who sourced their lineage to the legendary fire god himself who shares her name. And aside from her legendary origins, she's also well known for her skills with throwing daggers. So seeing that his own wife is willing to put her life on the line, Meng Huo summons up his courage and the last 50,000 warriors left within the cave to charge out for a showdown with Zhuge Liang, who is now moving towards the south banks. And just as they rode out, the vanguards of the Shu Han forces arrived, and leading the way was General Zhang Yi. And with the two armies lined up to face each other, Zhu Rong rode out on her red horse with 5 throwing daggers placed on her back and a silver spear in hand to challenge Zhang Yi, who was taken aback by both the gender and the appearance of this new general. Not willing to back down, Zhang Yi accepts the duel, and the two of them went at it for a few rounds until Zhu Rong suddenly pulls out of the fight and starts to race back towards her army. Not willing to give up on the fight, Zhang Yi gives chase, only to have a dagger thrown right at his face. Luckily, Zhang Yi was able to spot the dagger and react to it in time by turning his body just so to avoid being killed, but the dagger still struck him in his left shoulder, and the pain took him off his horse. And before he could get up, the Nanman troops already swarmed him and tied him up as their prisoner. Back on the Shu Han side, Ma Zhong, who was also within the vanguard forces, rides out at this moment to try to rescue Zhang Yi, but Zhu Rong has already rode back to cut him off. And before he could even get within range of a swing of his weapon, 2 daggers found their way to the chest of his horse, and he was thrown into the ground as well. And just like Zhang Yi, Ma Zhong was swarmed by Nanman troops and taken prisoner as well. With both of these generals captured, the Shu Han vanguard forces routed back to the safety of the Sanjiang city, as Zhu Rong and Meng Huo also retreated back to celebrate their victory back inside the Silver Pit caves. Back inside the cave, Zhu Rong calls for executioners to come and take Zhang Yi and Ma Zhong's head off. But Meng Huo waves them off as he explains that Zhuge Liang has shown him mercy 5 times already, so it would be wrong for him to execute these Shu Han officers now. He goes farther to explain to his wife that let's just wait until we beat back Zhuge Liang entirely first before we make any rash decisions, as Zhang Yi and Ma Zhong are thrown into the dungeon instead, awaiting their fates. Back on the Shu Han side, the shattered army had now started to filter back into the city, and the news of Zhang Yi and Ma Zhong's capture has finally reached Zhuge Liang, who quickly summons Ma Dai, Zhao Yun, and Wei Yan to set up a strategy against the Nanman forces. On the next day, Zhao Yun led a force out to the Nanman side and challenged their forces, and Zhu Rong once again rode out in response. These 2 generals dueled for a little bit before Zhao Yun pulled out of the duel to retreat, but Zhu Rong, being cautious of Zhuge Liang's tricks, did not pursue, as she simply returned back to the caves. Then, by the afternoon, Wei Yan also arrives for a challenge, and Zhu Rong rides out again in response, and after another quick duel, Wei Yan also pulls out and retreats. And once again, Zhu Rong holds the army back and simply returns to the cave. Then on the next day, Zhao Yun comes back yet again in the morning, and the same thing repeats. Then by the afternoon, this was Wei Yan's turn. And as their duel ended as Wei Yan was pulling back, Wei Yan's men started hurling profanities at Zhu Rong, accusing her of being scared for a real fight. And at this point, Zhu Rong, being already fed up with the Shu Han tactics, finally snapped and gave the order to pursue, as she personally led the charge on Wei Yan. But her charge ended quickly as she chased Wei Yan into a forest where Ma Dai's force had been waiting for the last 2 days, as chains and traps were pulled on the ground to dismount Zhu Rong, who was quickly tied up and taken prisoner. And when the Nanman troops that followed their queen tried to rescue her, Zhao Yun's forces, who had been resting from their morning shift, came out and made quick work of the remaining Nanman forces. So, with Lady Zhu Rong in hand, Zhuge Liang quickly negotiated a prisoner exchange where Zhu Rong was traded for the release of Zhang Yi and Ma Zhong. And just as Meng Huo was starting to sulk again, thinking about their setbacks, news of King Mu Lu's arrival put a smile on his face as he walked out of the cave to greet his reinforcement. And what he saw at the cave entrance delighted him, as King Mu Lu sat on top of a white, magnificent elephant with 2 sabers at his side. Not only were there elephants, King Mu Lu's men also had tigers, leopards, and wolves, and not wanting to waste a moment, King Mu Lu requested to take on the Shu Han army right away. So they marched out of the silver pits together and issued a challenge to the Shuhan camp. And out from the Shuhan camp came Zhao Yun and Wei Yan as they finished lining up their cavalry to get prepared for the fight. And Zhao Yun looks over and whispers to Wei Yan that they have been fighting in wars all their lives, but never have they seen beasts like these on the battlefield. But before they could even finish up their little conversation, King Mulu let out a roar as his army of beasts and men made their charge. Now, the sheer sight of these creatures have already startled most of the horses on the Shuhan side, and the dust and wind that resulted from the charging elephants made it seem like Mulu's force was a divine force, and that the Shuhan forces shattered and fled back across the river to the safety of the Sanjiang city. Back inside the city, Zhuge Liang went over the reports of the enemy forces and told Zhao Yun and Wei Yan to not worry about it, as they had come prepared. From the military supply depot that had been following them all this way came 20 large carts with 10 painted red and 10 painted black. Zhuge Liang ordered the red carts to come out and store the black carts back in, and within these red carts turned out to be costumes of large beasts with wood carvings for faces and colorful clothing that would fit 10 men per beast, with steel claws and thorns on the side of these cloth for the men inside. And aside from this strange appearance, the wood carving heads of these creatures had contraptions inside where an ignition system was placed so that when lit on the battlefield, it would create fires coming from the mouth and smokes coming from the nostrils of these beasts. So 1,000 men were summoned and quickly picked from the army and trained to use these 100 beast costumes that they had prepared before they headed out to challenge the Nanman forces the next day. So on the next day, Zhuge Liang in his iconic war cart would ride out on the battlefield in person, and when this news reached back to Meng Huo, the entire Nanman camp marched out in response. And when King Mulu saw Zhuge Liang across the battlefield for the first time, he sees this middle-aged wimpy man sitting in a wheelchair essentially, and lowers his guard as he let out another roar, which sent his force charging straight for Zhuge Liang. Then with one wave of his fan, 100 fake beasts charged out from behind Shuhan's formations, with bronze bells tied to their side, making loud noises, and fire spewing from their mouth and black smoke emitting from their nostrils. And this time, it was the real animals that were in for a surprise, as they had never seen such creatures in their life. And after a few attempts and encounters with these steel claws and spikes on the sides of such beasts, the animals were in a frenzy and started to run in all directions, with some even attacking their tamers as their tamers tried to goad them back onto the enemy. And following this chaotic retreat of the animals, the Shuhan cavalry gave charge at the enemy, whose formation has largely been destroyed by the rampaging elephants running back, so they stood no chance. And King Mulu was even killed as spearmen finally took down his elephant, and the silver pit cave was taken with ease, even though Meng Huo managed to escape this time. And on the next day, following their grand victory, Zhuge Liang, who has now made camp inside the silver pit cave, was laying out plans with his generals to search and capture Meng Huo from the surrounding areas, when scouts reported that Zhu Rong and a small force have returned to the silver pit cave with Meng Huo tied up as a prisoner, claiming that they are here to surrender. Ever the cautious commander, Zhuge Liang first had Zhang Ni and Ma Zhong ready 2,000 guards inside the cave before they let Zhu Rong's party enter, and as soon as they entered, Zhuge Liang's forces took Zhu Rong's entire group captive and searched them for concealed weapons. And sure enough, they all had dagger and axes hidden on them as they were making a last-ditch effort to kill off their nemesis Zhuge Liang. So with this capture, Zhuge Liang once again walks up to Meng Huo and asks for a sixth time, "You are now once again my prisoner, and this time you're even a prisoner in your own home. Will you finally concede defeat?" So to find out how Meng Huo responds this time, come back tomorrow as we'll continue this lore series then. So thank you guys for watching, and see you all next time. Bye!